ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that Caitlin McMullen has shaken the very foundation of General Hospital fandom with a revelation so unexpected, so unsettling, that it's no longer just a whisper of possibility, it's a looming psychological tsunami that threatens to transform Willow Tate forever. In a recent interview that was intended to be a quiet reflection on her character's emotional journey, Caitlin instead dropped what fans are now calling one of the most bone-chilling clues yet about a seismic shift in Willow's mental state. While she was careful not to confirm anything outright, her cryptic words were enough to ignite a wave of speculation, interpretation, and outright alarm. Something is coming. And it's not just a plot twist, it's a descent into something far more disturbing. She referred vaguely to new challenges that will test Willow's sense of identity, as well as moments where truth and perception may blur, leaving viewers to wonder whether Willow will even recognize herself by the time this storyline reaches its inevitable breaking point. And then came the sentence that sent a chill down the collective spine of the audience. Caitlin hinted at the emergence of aspects of Willow that even she doesn't understand. It was a loaded comment, calculated or not, and it opened the door to one of the most psychologically complex possibilities in soap opera storytelling. That Willow may be living with not one self, but two. That what fans have been witnessing is not just emotional unraveling, but the early stages of dissociative identity disorder. What makes this potential storyline so harrowing is how well it fits the tragic architecture of Willow's recent narrative. The emotional pressure cooker she's been trapped in, from losing Wiley and Amelia to being manipulated by Drew, to being isolated from Michael and alienated from her own support system, has created a perfect storm of trauma, repression, and desperation. And it is not born out of melodrama. It is born out of deep, prolonged emotional abuse and psychological fracture. Caitlin's performance over the last few months has already showcased Willow's disturbing detachment. Her frequent emotional blackouts, her strange fatigue, and her increasingly disconnected gaze, as if she is floating just outside of her own skin, watching herself collapse from a distance. Fans assumed these were signs of depression. But what if they were something darker? What if these weren't just moments of weakness, but moments of absence? What if Willow was no longer alone in her own mind? This is where Caitlin's revelation takes on even greater weight, because not only is she hinting at the emergence of a new internal struggle, but she is also inviting fans to consider that this new persona, the other self, awakening within Willow, might not be entirely unfamiliar. Indeed, the shadow now being cast across Willow's fragile mental state seems to belong to none other than Nelle Benson, her late twin sister. Nelle, the chaos bringer, the manipulator. The woman whose own identity was torn apart by trauma and whose presence continues to haunt Port Charles years after her death, may not be returning in body, but she may be returning in mind. And more terrifying than Nelle's resurrection is the idea that she may now be living through Willow. This is not reincarnation. This is not memory. This is psychological possession. The embodiment of everything Willow fears, buried so deeply in her subconscious that it has begun to take shape in the form of a second identity. It makes sense. Willow and Nelle share blood. They share a history shaped by abandonment, pain, and betrayal. Both were robbed of maternal stability. Both were manipulated by powerful men. Both lost children, Nelle permanently, and Willow recently. And if the line between empathy and identification is thin, then Willow may have already crossed it. The emergence of Nelle's voice inside Willow could be the result of repressed guilt, unresolved grief, or the mind's final effort to protect itself by creating a new persona capable of surviving the emotional wasteland that Willow's life has become. Caitlin's mention of aspects Willow doesn't recognize may well be a direct allusion to this hidden persona slowly becoming sentient. Already, there are narrative breadcrumbs suggesting Willow is no longer fully aware of her own movements. During the hospital incident involving Daisy and the mysterious cell phone activation, Willow was reportedly resting, yet something about that excuse rings false. It's as if she was missing, not just from the room, but from herself. And then there's the symbolic weight of the mobile phone, which many fans immediately recognized as a callback to Nelle's most infamous psychological warfare, the penguin phone used to gaslight Carly and drag her into emotional collapse by invoking the ghost of Morgan. That entire sequence, deeply rooted in emotional manipulation and memory distortion, feels eerily mirrored now in what's happening around Daisy. The bracelet switch, the surveillance, the strange silence, all point to someone with both intimate knowledge of emotional leverage and an eerie detachment from consequences. If Willow truly is splitting into multiple identities, and one of those identities is a psychological recreation of Nelle, then we are watching not just a woman spiral, we are watching a woman become someone else entirely. What makes this trajectory so powerful, and horrifying, is that it allows General Hospital to explore the deep psychological trauma of womanhood in crisis without resorting to fantastical plot devices. This isn't about ghosts. This isn't about resurrection. This is about what happens when a woman breaks, when the system fails her, when motherhood is weaponized against her, and when every person she trusted abandons her. Nelle, for all her villainy, was not born evil. She was created by a world that used her, rejected her, and then watched her drown. Now Willow is navigating those same waters, and the personality taking over may be one that learned how to survive that drowning by becoming the storm. Caitlin McMullen's subtle hint at adjustments to Willow's identity is no small comment. It signals a narrative shift where the obsession is no longer about protecting children, reclaiming dignity, or repairing relationships. It is about survival at any cost, even if it means surrendering to a darker self. Fans should be prepared. This isn't going to be a storyline resolved in a few episodes. This is the slow descent of a fractured woman into a psychological labyrinth where memory, identity, and morality blur into shadows. And in those shadows, Nelle is waiting. Not as a ghost. Not as a memory. But as a manifestation of everything Willow has repressed, everything she fears, and everything she might become. Caitlin McMullen has delivered nuanced, layered performances for years, but if this storyline continues to unfold the way she hints it might, we are about to witness her most haunting, transformative work yet. The question is no longer, is Willow okay? The question is, which Willow are we seeing, and how long until she's no longer the one in control? The obsession has begun. The mind has cracked. And the descent into psychological horror is no longer theoretical. It's here. It began with a silence no one noticed. The kind of silence that comes just before something breaks, fragile, imperceptible, and deadly. For days, Willow Tate had appeared to the world as a woman on the verge of redemption, engaged to Drew Kane, fighting to regain custody of Wiley and Amelia, reclaiming fragments of a life that had been stripped from her piece by piece. But beneath the carefully curated smiles, the rehearsed statements, and the pristine white dress hanging untouched in her closet, something was fracturing. Something was shifting. And in the recesses of her mind, far from the light, far from logic, another version of Willow was awakening, hungrier, colder, and entirely unbound by reason. This version didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't grieve. She watched. And she remembered. She remembered what Michael had taken. She remembered every insult, every betrayal, every time he held the children closer while pushing her further away. And most of all, she remembered Daisy, the innocent child now sleeping peacefully in the Quartermain nursery, the child who had everything Willow had lost. It was supposed to be a quiet night. Sasha had stepped out briefly, trusting that Michael and the staff would keep an eye on the baby. Willow had offered to help. Of course she had. Who better to rock Daisy to sleep than the woman who once held Wiley against her chest, who once whispered lullabies into Amelia's ears? Who better than the mother now stripped of her title? Michael didn't hesitate. That was his mistake. They didn't notice how long she stayed in Daisy's room. They didn't question the way she began humming the old tune Nelle used to sing in the halls of Ferncliff. They didn't hear the quiet unfastening of the bracelet. They didn't see the bag waiting under the stroller. And by the time the cameras blinked to black and the nursery fell into silence, it was already too late. Willow was gone. And so was Daisy. The moment of discovery was chaos. Sasha returned, frantic. Michael began shouting. The staff fumbled to explain how someone so trusted, so seemingly composed, could vanish with a child under their watch. But it wasn't just a disappearance. It was a message. Because within hours, Michael received a text, one not from an unknown number, but from Willow's own phone. A photo. Daisy, wrapped in one of Amelia's old blankets. A note in Willow's handwriting, "Now you'll understand." No demand. No explanation. Just those words. And for Michael, the meaning was clear. This wasn't a ransom. It wasn't desperation. It was revenge. Willow hadn't snapped. She had calculated. She had watched Michael move on, rebuild, smile. Plan a future with Sasha and Daisy as though the past had never existed. And the child she held, fed, soothed, had become a symbol of everything she had lost. But it wasn't Willow who took Daisy. Not exactly. It was the other one. The one who had no name yet, but wore Nelle's memory like armor. The personality that had quietly taken form in the corners of Willow's mind, forged from grief, rejection, and rage. This was the version of Willow who didn't want custody, she wanted retribution. But in her pursuit of vengeance, Willow had forgotten the simplest truth: chaos cannot be contained. As she cradled Daisy in a rented room on the outskirts of Port Charles, feeding her formula with trembling hands, there was no joy in her eyes. No serenity. Only emptiness. Only obsession. She began referring to Daisy as her own. She spoke to her in soft tones, correcting herself every time she called her Amelia. She played with her toes, hummed lullabies, and whispered promises that were never meant to be heard. Because deep down, even Willow didn't know which part of her was speaking anymore. Was it the grieving mother? The furious sister? The broken woman? Or something else entirely? Meanwhile, back in the city, the consequences had begun to multiply. News of the kidnapping spread fast. The Quartermain name was splashed across headlines. Sasha broke down in public, demanding answers. Jason began his own search, his instincts telling him that the woman he once defended was no longer in control of herself. And Drew, who had spent weeks constructing a perfect public image, polishing the optics of their upcoming wedding, and silencing rumors of control, now found himself facing the impossible. His fiancée had become a criminal. A fugitive. And every lie he had told to protect her, every manipulation he had committed to preserve their narrative, was now collapsing beneath the weight of a single, horrifying truth: Willow was dangerous. The wedding was scheduled for the following day. The press had already gathered. The florists had arrived. The cake had been delivered. But the bride was gone. Drew stood in the center of the empty ballroom, watching as staff dismantled decorations, as photographers packed up their lenses, and as guests began to leave in hushed confusion. The statement released to the public called it a postponement. But the truth was far more damning. The wedding wasn't postponed, it was obliterated by the truth. Willow hadn't vanished under pressure. She had chosen chaos. And Drew, the man who believed he could reshape her pain into public redemption, had failed to see that she was never healing, she was hiding. What followed was a reckoning. Jason tracked down the motel using traffic footage, cornering Willow just as she was preparing to leave again. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. She simply handed Daisy over, kissed the child on the forehead, and said, "I just wanted to hold her a little longer." But even then, her eyes didn't reflect remorse. They reflected clarity, terrifying, delusional clarity. Because in her mind, she hadn't kidnapped a child. She had taken back what was stolen. And she had proven her point: Michael would never forget her. Not now. Not after this. Willow was taken into custody quietly, evaluated for psychiatric treatment, and placed under observation. But the damage had already been done. The wedding was over. The custody hearings were reopened. Sasha was inconsolable. And Drew, for the first time, stood speechless. Because he hadn't just lost a bride. He had enabled a spiral. He had packaged mental illness as redemption, pain as progress, and trauma as transformation. And now, the world saw the truth. Willow Tate, the once beloved schoolteacher, the grieving mother, the soft-spoken survivor, was now front-page news for a crime that couldn't be rationalized. The whispers turned into headlines. The compassion turned into judgment. And beneath it all, a darker question lingered: was Willow still in there at all? Or had Nelle, in some unspeakable way, finally returned? The investigation continued. Psychological evaluations revealed signs of dissociative identity disorder, triggered by compounded grief and unresolved trauma. Medical staff reported personality shifts, memory lapses. Conflicting testimonies from Willow herself. There were times she denied ever seeing Daisy. Other times she confessed everything and asked where Wiley was. And in the darkest moments, she would sit silently in her room, staring into the mirror as if waiting for someone else to speak. The public wanted accountability. The families wanted answers. But the truth was, there were none. Only questions. Only wreckage. What Willow had done could not be undone. She had kidnapped an innocent child, destroyed a wedding, and revealed the full scope of her mental collapse in the most catastrophic way imaginable. And yet, for those who looked closer, the signs had always been there. The fatigue. The stares. The humming. The slips in memory. The obsession with motherhood turned pathological. This wasn't a snap, it was a slow death of the self, one no one had dared to name until it was too late. And now, as Willow sits in a psychiatric facility under 24-hour surveillance, the world waits. Waits to see if she will recover. Waits to see which version of her will emerge. Waits to see if she will ever again be Willow Tate, or if she has become something else entirely. Something shaped by loss. Fueled by betrayal. And haunted by the echo of a sister she never truly knew, but may now be embodying. Because in the end, this wasn't just a crime. It was a transformation. And for poor Charles, it was a warning. A warning that beneath every quiet smile, there may be a storm. And sometimes, that storm has a name. Sometimes, that name is Nelle. Willow is no longer simply a grieving mother. She has become something far more volatile, something broken, unpredictable, and increasingly dangerous. What began as whispers of emotional collapse has evolved into a chilling reality that no one in Port Charles can continue to ignore. Willow is unraveling before their eyes. And as she descends further into a fractured psyche consumed by pain, betrayal, and loss, she is no longer merely reacting to her past, she is rewriting her place in it, and in doing so, dragging others into a psychological storm they are powerless to escape. This is not the story of a woman healing. This is the story of a woman unrecognizable to those who once loved her. And the consequences are already unfolding with terrifying speed. One by one, the people who once stood by her are becoming victims of the very darkness they tried to soothe. Michael, who thought he was protecting his children, now faces the cruel irony that his refusal to trust Willow may have been the very thing that pushed her over the edge. His obsession with control, with legal strategy, with safeguarding Wiley and Amelia, has backfired. He thought Drew was the danger. He thought Nina was the threat. But the real threat had been sleeping in his house, rocking his children, smiling through the tears with a fracture growing inside her soul. And now, Michael watches in horror as the woman he once called family begins to haunt his every step. Her actions not just unsettling, but criminal. From the moment she took Daisy, the illusion of safety was shattered. And now, even with Daisy returned, there is no putting the pieces back together. Not when the woman who held his daughter in secret continues to spiral without remorse. Not when her eyes carry the weight of someone who no longer sees the world as it is, but only as she needs it to be. Drew, once Willow's partner, now finds himself not in a position of rescue, but of exposure. He played a dangerous game, elevating Willow as a symbol of resilience. Polishing her pain into a narrative he could manipulate for public favor, engagement optics, and strategic courtroom advantage. But in doing so, he ignored the real damage. He dismissed the warning signs. He treated her breakdown as branding, and her suffering as strategy. And now, he is paying the price. The wedding that never happened has become a symbol of the lie he helped build. The press has turned. The Quartermain name is stained again. And worst of all, Drew cannot deny his complicity. He didn't just miss the signs, he buried them. He silenced them. And now, as Willow sinks deeper into disassociation, Drew faces the grim reality that his need for control may have enabled a collapse no one can undo. But perhaps the most heart-wrenching casualty of Willow's descent is Sasha. A woman who has endured more than most, addiction, death, betrayal, and heartbreak, was finally beginning to rebuild her life through the innocence of her daughter. And now, that safety, that trust, has been violated by someone she once considered a kindred spirit. Willow, who once comforted Sasha through grief, who once stood beside her in motherhood and pain, is now the very figure Sasha sees in her nightmares. The moment Willow took Daisy, she didn't just commit a crime. She shattered the fragile scaffolding Sasha had built for her healing. Every feeding, every lullaby, every touch is now tainted with doubt. Because Willow was there. In her home. In her nursery. And now, even with Daisy safe, Sasha cannot close her eyes without fearing that Willow might return, not to steal again, but to finish something twisted that has only just begun. And worse. Sasha knows that this wasn't the act of a desperate woman. It was the beginning of something far more calculated, far more possessive, and far more unhinged. What Willow has become is no longer just a reflection of her trauma. She has become a vessel for everything unspoken, everything repressed, and everything that Nelle once embodied. The obsession with motherhood has transformed into entitlement. The loss has twisted into justification. And the sorrow has congealed into something cold and methodical. Willow now operates from a place where morality no longer applies, where she believes she has been wronged so deeply that every act of madness is merely a correction of injustice. And that belief makes her dangerous, not just to herself, but to everyone in her orbit. Michael walks through the Quartermain estate unable to sleep, checking doors, watching monitors. Unable to forget the look in Willow's eyes when she handed Daisy over as though the child was hers. Drew has stopped answering calls from media outlets. His polished image now unraveling faster than his relationship ever did. Sasha clings to Daisy every night with trembling arms, knowing that love is no longer enough to protect them. And all three of them carry the same terror, because Willow is still out there. Not in hiding, not in prison, but in limbo. Under psychiatric observation. Being treated. While no one truly knows which version of her is responding to therapy. And that's the most terrifying truth of all, no one knows who they're dealing with anymore. Is it the Willow they once loved? Or is it the echo of Nelle, the shadow twin, now fused with her soul and steering her toward vengeance with every breath? The consequences are only beginning. The court may intervene again. The state may file charges. The psychiatric reports may suggest release, or permanent commitment. But no legal document, no diagnosis, no treatment plan will erase what's been done. Willow has crossed a line. She has taken a child, destroyed a wedding, weaponized trauma, and fractured every bond she once swore to protect. And as Michael, Drew, and Sasha look into the mirror of their own decisions, each realizing how they contributed to this disaster in their own way, they are haunted by the same thought. That they didn't just lose Willow. They created what she has become. And what she's becoming is far from over.